to talk a little bit about the visualization of Vajrasattva. So we have some props isn't the right word. We have some visual aids. Thank you. Some very virtuous visual aids. And there are different depictions. So we have this beautiful statue here as an aid for reminding us of the qualities that we want to develop. And then we also have this beautiful tanka that usually hangs over in the tea room in Lower Gautami. And their hands are slightly different, aren't they? I wish I could tell you something about why they're different. I can't, so maybe one of you know. Invariably, in a course like this, there will be people who are thinking, I can't visualize, right? I can't visualize, but we're visualizing all the time. When someone criticizes us, don't we visualize very clearly that person that we don't like? Or if we're going to meet a friend, don't we visualize what we're going to say or where we're going to meet? We're visualizing all the time, actually, aren't we? You're probably visualizing something right now. If I say, think of your cell phone, I bet a very clear image comes up in your mind. Maybe some longing, too. When we're hungry, we start visualizing what we're going to eat. What have you been visualizing this morning? M&Ms? Crackers? What? Schwarzborg. I don't know what that is. Dark bread. Okay, but we find it difficult to visualize Buddhas like Vajrasattva. And why would that be? It's simply because we don't have the familiarity yet. But knowing a little bit about the plasticity of the mind and about how we can create habits, how we can change the mind, then it's possible to become familiar with the visualizations so that just by very quickly thinking of one of the deities that we're most familiar with, that deity comes to mind. Vajrasattva shares all the good qualities with every other Buddha. So in that way, Vajrasattva is no different. Vajrasattva has consummate qualities like consummate compassion, meaning that compassion cannot be developed any further. It's the ultimate type of compassion. Vajrasattva has ultimate wisdom. You know, that omniscient mind knows all phenomena, both conventional phenomena and ultimate phenomena, simultaneously. That is a unique feature of a Buddha. Buddhas also have a consummate ability to help other beings, to benefit others. So imagine, when we try to help others, we guess to the best of our ability what they might need to hear or how we can help them. But imagine having perfect clairvoyance and knowing exactly what to say to somebody. Wouldn't that be handy? So they all have the same realizations, they all have the same qualities, but they express different aspects of awakening for our benefit. They appear in different physical forms to engage our senses and also to appear as a particular archetype. So we might find that some of us are attracted to the archetype of thousand-armed Chenrezig, hard-opening thousand-armed Chenrezig. Some people might find they're more attracted to Medicine Buddha. Maybe it's something about the deep blue color or the depiction of the hands. Some of you might find a strong attraction to Manjushri with the sword, cutting all the ignorance. So each of us have a different predisposition, different karmic seeds, karmic propensities, different abilities, and so we'll be attracted to different deities at different times in our lives. When we visualize, we're not trying to visualize a tanka or a statue necessarily. They're just an aid to help us visualize something that is actually made of light. We're going to be visualizing an appearance of the deity and also thinking about that quality of light. Now, something that we don't emphasize in our practice is that the basis of all that visualization is these deities are arising out of emptiness. That's not what Venerable asked me to talk about, so But typically in a tantric practice like Vajrasattva, we would spend some time meditating on our ultimate nature and also the ultimate nature of the deity. And how at that very basic level, the nature of our mind and the nature of the deity's mind is exactly the same, with some differences. They've purified their minds and they've cultivated all their good qualities. And we have the potential to do that, although I'm assuming that most of us haven't done that yet. So Vajrasattva, or whatever deity we're visualizing, is reminding us, is mirroring back to us our potential because we share that same nature, the empty nature of our mind, the fact that our minds are not concrete, not permanent, not inherent, not autonomous, not independent. Because of that fact, the fact that our mind is dependent, then we can cultivate qualities that will lead us to a similar state. So I remember that in a Medicine Buddha retreat in 2016, Venerable presented a way of visualizing the deity that I found very effective for my mind. And so I'd like to try to do something similar today. And so notice how Vajrasattva is sitting. Either this, we can look at this statue as a representation, or some of you can see the thangka very clearly. Notice how the legs are arranged, the crossed position. Just take that in. And how does it feel when you might imagine sitting in that cross-legged position? What comes to your mind? Stable, stability. Very stable. Pain. That's a projection. Okay, so pain for some and stability for others. Okay, and just to think about that pain. Pain comes because why? Our muscles are not relaxed enough, open enough, flexible enough, right? And so there is some discomfort, or maybe there's an injury. But imagine, or this is an imagination, so just imagine that your body now becomes very flexible. And although we're looking at something that's a solid statue or something that's a two-dimensional picture on paper, imagine being made of light and crossing your legs like that. Maybe that brings a different image. So just notice how it feels when you imagine sitting in that cross-legged position. It creates 3 points on the ground, doesn't it? So it is a very stable posture. And that's important when people are doing long meditations in particular. And then notice how his arms and hands are arranged. And notice how they're holding the Vajra in the bell. And just notice what that conveys to you. Balance. Mm-hmm. What else? Mm-hmm.
I hate to be a downer, but that gives me a cramp in my hand.
Holding the bell or the Vajra gives you a cramp in your hand?
Staying in that.
Okay.
Now, if I think of it in the regards to light, that kind of relaxes that image in my mind.
Maybe we need to back up just a little bit. And first of all, imagine our bodies in the nature of light. So that's a good point. Deities' bodies are very different than the bodies that we have. We have very limited types of bodies because we're controlled by karma and afflictions. We have bodies made of flesh and blood that are impermanent, constantly changing, subject to suffering. Because deities have completely purified their minds of all causes of suffering, they no longer have a flesh and blood body. They may show the aspect of having a body like ours. But have you ever wondered, how did this deity get such a small waist? Or, why is it that the Buddha has such big shoulders for someone who came from India? Typically they have very thin bodies. Not always, but... So these are not ordinary bodies projected by karma and afflictions like ours. These are bodies in the nature of light. So, just a technical point: when a person has a non-conceptual direct perception of emptiness, from that point onwards, and that's not Buddhahood, that's way before Buddhahood, they take on a body in the nature of light. Nature of mind. And then that body and mind, as they continue to go through that purification process through the paths and grounds, eventually they manifest a body in the nature of light. Yeah.
Conveys purpose.
Purpose, it conveys purpose. Mm.
Gentleness to it. That it's gentle itself. It's not a tense grip on it. It's a very.
Mm-hmm. So it conveys a gentle grip. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a sense of holding in both of them, more so in the tongue of kind of holding.
Holding. Mm-hmm. Yes.
It felt more like he owns wisdom and compassion, like it's part of him. It's like holding it.
That's nice. So for you, it's like he's owning what they represent. The Vajra represents the method aspect of the path, or compassion, or great compassion, bodhicitta, and the bell represents wisdom. Yeah, and so he's owning them. And in this thangka, the arms are crossed, right? Yeah, and the card that you have. So when we bring those two together, what happens? There's a union. Yeah, there's a togetherness. And so that's one of the goals that we're aiming for, is to combine method and wisdom in one mind in our tantric practices. And now, what happens when you look at Vajrasattva's eyes? What's being conveyed to you by the eyes?
That is a gentleness. Looking at you very gently.
A gentleness. Gazing at you with what kind of quality? Compassion. Yeah. Serenity. When you say serenity, are you talking about a peacefulness?
Yeah, calm, kind of serene.
Venerable uses that word for calm abiding, so just checking.
Oh.
Yeah, serenity, like a peacefulness. What else? Acceptance. That's important, isn't it? Well, we could say wisdom and method, or we could say wisdom and compassion. Mm-hmm. Just keeping it very general. Yeah, so Vajrasattva, one of the qualities of Vajrasattva, or any deity really, is looking at us with eyes of complete acceptance, eyes of kindness, eyes of love and compassion, joy, eyes of joy. And how does it feel to you to be seen by the eyes of Vajrasattva? What kind of impact does that make on you, to be seen with eyes of acceptance and compassion?
Maybe understood.
You feel understood.
Safe.
Yeah.
Safe.
It makes me go open to him.
It makes you feel open to open up to Vajrasattva. Like he's your best friend, yeah? Yeah. Like you could tell him anything. You could tell him all your faults and it'd be okay.
I think so.
Yeah. Good. Any of you feel exposed? All right. Yeah.
Is it better to visualize the image in one dimension to start and then make it three-dimensional later on? It's easier to hold it in one dimension. You can make it glow when it's flat.
If you can make it glow when it's flat, is it better to start with one dimension rather than three dimension? I would say start where you are and do what works for you. Venerable Jigme often uses the image of a hologram. And I like that image because it really brings in the lightness and the ephemeralness of that visualization. So if that helps, thinking of a hologram of Vajrasattva in the space in front. So how does Vajrasattva looking at us with such an expression support our ability to purify our mistakes? He's non-judgmental. So if you're not being judged, then it's going to be easier to purify. As Tanner said, really open up and oh, you can bring out the mics if you like. That would be helpful.
Yeah, I wanted to say he would look with
Um,
anger towards me. If he would look with anger with me, I possibly would not open myself up to him and entrust everything what I would like to confess or even apologize, maybe.
Yeah.
I think over time in developing a relationship with Vajrasattva, he's been more accepting of my faults than I have. And that's been illuminating.
So take a moment to imagine yourself having that facial expression, having such wise, kind eyes, looking at yourself as well as others with that kind of acceptance and compassion and love. Just more, it's a rhetorical question. How would that feel?
Bliss.
Bliss. It would, wouldn't it? One of the things that came up in our discussion group this morning was how important it can be to, I'm not sure I'll be able to say this as you said it, Jim, but to feel the positive qualities of allowing yourself to feel purified. Does that capture it? Can you see or feel Vajrasattva's intention to be of benefit to others in this posture? Yes, no, not really? It's okay. There's no right answer. Yeah.
It feels almost like he's waiting to help me as soon as I need it.
What about that image gives you that impression? I'm curious.
I guess the facial expression, again, that peacefulness, but that the connection in the eyes, not forcing anything upon me, but ready and able to help.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up because one of the qualities of Buddhas is that they have already done everything from their side to benefit all sentient beings. And they are just waiting for us to do something from our side so that we create the causes to receive that benefit. They've done everything from their side already. Yeah, and that's an important thing to keep in mind, that we have to do something from our side. And so this practice gives us an opportunity to do something from our side to receive their benefit.
And they're not lying on the beach waiting for us. So the other thing that is, this body is poised, especially this image. It's poised, waiting for us to, wake up.
Doesn't it look like this Vajrasattva could just stand right up and start working for our benefit? It almost, to me, when I look at it, it almost looks alive. Do you get that sense? Such a beautiful facial painting. Yeah. Yes?
I'm sort of feeling the portability
of this image. You have the statues if that's what you need that day. But you've got this image that you can, once you're able to do that, carry with you anywhere, anytime, any place. So it's a portable thing to have in your pocket.
Yeah, that's right. And again, the more familiar we are with that image, the better off we'll be. Often when people think of developing mindfulness or concentration, they think of focusing on the breath. But throughout a lot of the literature, we're encouraged to meditate on Buddha images, either Buddha Shakyamuni or a deity, because just looking at an image like this puts a powerful positive imprint on our mind, just looking at it, regardless of our intention. So imagine if we're generating that image in our mind, like really thinking about whether you start from the top down or the bottom up. Okay, the legs are in that stable Vajra position, and the hands are like this, and the face is like this. Really building it up detail by detail in your own mind. that whole activity becomes very virtuous. I remember meeting a woman in Australia who had grown up in Malaysia doing deity practice and particularly focusing on Buddha Shakyamuni. And she told a story that I don't remember now the details of what kind of illness she had. I think it was some kind of cancer. And she said while she was in the hospital and undergoing surgery, she just kept getting this image of Buddha Shakyamuni coming to her mind. That's familiarization. That would be very handy during surgeries or at the time of death. It would be really handy. And how does that happen? Simply through familiarization. So visualizing Vajrasattva works on our mind in a very special way. It waters virtuous seeds in our mind stream. And so the more we familiarize with this visualization, then the easier it is for that image to come into our mind and for us to settle into the feeling that it is conveying to us. It's interesting, maybe some of you already have this experience with certain deities when you've done long retreats with them. Just calling that deity to mind, immediately there's a connection, there's a feeling, there's a support. So this is very different than visualizing the person we most can't stand, right? Very different experience, which makes us agitated or disturbed. A mind that is peaceful is much more effective in the world, isn't it? When our mind is stable, peaceful, settled, we're going to be much more effective in our communication with others, in our actions, in how we're able to actually benefit others. Also, this morning, Venerable talked about how the body is made of light, or actually it's in the sadhana. The body is made of light, white light, right? So what does white, the color white, convey to you? Unfortunately, the statue is gold, but I mean, maybe it's not unfortunate, but it's so that's the benefit of having the tanka is that we have the image in white. So what does that color convey to you? Purity. Yeah, it's interesting how different colors convey something very particular. Also, we can visualize, this is what Venerable mentioned this morning, that we can visualize the 3 syllables inside their body. So they have an om at their crown. So just inside the crown, underneath the skull. And usually what I've heard is it's very small. So for English speakers, you can just visualize it in English letters, O-M, om. Those of you who know a little bit of Tibetan, you can practice, or Sanskrit, whatever. So an om at the crown, symbolizing or representing the purity of all the Buddha's body. There is a red ah inside the throat. So it's a body made of light. We can visualize these letters also, or these syllables, inside the body and also made of colored light. So a white om at the crown stands out a little bit different from the white of the body. A red ah at the throat, and then a blue hung at the heart. So the red ah at the throat represents pure speech. And then the mind is the purity of the mind. Mm-hmm. White, red, and blue. So Vajrasattva is, he has this aspect of being very still, doesn't he? Almost in meditative equipoise, or maybe in meditative equipoise, but also still engaging with suffering sentient beings. And notice he has a very relaxed, someone mentioned that already, a very relaxed appearance, very comfortable in his own skin. Well, he probably doesn't have skin, but very comfortable in his own light. So again, imagine what that would feel like. Never to feel agitated, nervous, self-conscious. Never squirming with that warm wash of shame that comes over us from time to time. Really comfortable with the purity of our motivations, our intentions, with our actions. Can you feel the peace in that? And that perfectly content expression of peace of mind is coming from the fact that his mind is completely free of all the afflictions, no attachment, no anger, no ignorance. Sometimes it's difficult for people to even begin to imagine that one day they will be a Buddha. Notice what happens in your mind when I say this. One day you will be a Buddha. You will be omniscient. You will be enlightened. You have a little argument going on? Anyway, thinking of this reminds us or helps us understand that we can develop these same qualities. So as we do the practice, we develop a little bit more confidence that we can actually transform our body, our speech, our mind to be more like the Buddhas. Also, notice that the Buddhas, all the Buddhas in this room actually, are either sitting or standing on a lotus. And we can also see that they're on a white moon cushion. So it might be new to some of you. Tantric practices actually are quite advanced practices. They're based on our understanding of sutra. They're based on our understanding of the perfection vehicle. And so there's an understanding that the foundation of all of these tantric practices is the motivation of bodhicitta to begin with. That's the lotus. And then I'm sorry. Lotus is renunciation, right? And the moon cushion is bodhicitta. In some depictions, mostly what I'm familiar with is highest yoga tantra depictions of deities, they'll also have a sun cushion underneath the moon cushion, and that's the correct view. So there you have the three principal aspects of the path. And it's interesting that often when teachers are asked to give an introduction to Tantra, what they talk about is the three principal aspects of the path. They don't even begin to talk about Tantra. That's the foundation that we bring. And so all of that informs the practice that we're doing. We had a Guru Puja the other day, and in the motivation I was drawing from something that I'd read in Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, and it's something that I like to reflect on. The idea that every Buddha was once a bodhisattva, and since the moment bodhisattvas first generated bodhicitta, uncontrived bodhicitta, or spontaneous bodhicitta, they have been concerned with our well-being and the well-being of all sentient beings. And all of their efforts to accumulate merit and to purify their minds and to develop the different perfections, the 6 perfections, all of that has been to perfect their ability to act on our behalf. So if they were doing that as bodhisattvas, when they achieve Buddhahood, are they just going to put their feet up then and relax, or are they going to keep going in that direction? A Buddha's love for sentient beings is greater than that of a mother for her only child. Isn't that sweet? They are perfectly aware of our circumstances. Buddhists know what we're doing right now. They're aware that we're sitting here and learning about this practice, trying to go further, deeper in this practice, making effort. They also know how oppressed we are by our karma and our mental afflictions. They already know that. I remember someone describing it this way, that when we're in front of the Buddhas, we can, as you mentioned, we can really open ourselves up. It would be ridiculous to try to pretend to be something we're not in front of a Buddha. It would be a bit like going to the doctor when you're really sick and saying, "Hello, I'm fine, I just came to visit you. I don't really need your services, I just came to visit. I'm actually okay, don't look inside me." Don't do any diagnostics. So I find that comforting to think about the fact that the Buddhas already know all of our past lives. They know our propensities, they know our abilities, they know our difficulties, and they're willing to help. They're willing to help us actualize all those potentials and abilities in the way that will serve us. So that's a little bit about the the visualization. Do you have any specific questions?
But it's more not specific to Vajrasattva necessarily, but I'm curious where these images came from. Are they just, visualizations from great masters? Or like, how do we know what Vajrasattva looks like? Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
I'll tell you what I know, and others can add if you have more to say about this. During the Buddha's lifetime, he actually taught tantric practices. And when different beings, different sentient beings, did those practices, I imagine he gave some kind of oral instruction about how to begin visualizing that deity. But then at some point, the mind becomes so clarified and you become so close to that deity that the deity appears to you. And so then people would attempt to describe or draw or paint these deities. What's interesting is that Tantra was already practiced in the Hindu tradition, and I don't know a lot about that, but the Buddha borrowed elements from the Hindu tantric practice, but also incorporated very unique aspects, like the aspect that all of this is predicated on understanding something about emptiness. And really that's speaking to us about our Buddha nature. Because the mind is empty, as I was saying earlier, because our mind, the nature of our mind and the nature of a Buddha's mind is completely the same in its empty aspect, that natural purity, then the afflictions are adventitious and they can be removed, they can be abandoned, they can be counteracted or opposed.
I'm finding I'm coming to look at these deities with a lot of preconceptions about what certain forms mean. So it's difficult to me to resonate with them and connect with them because I see a lot of culture and all of these different layers of things that I find actually sort of distracting. Because when I think of love or acceptance or joy, that brings a certain feeling. And when I look at Vajrasattva, I get a very different feeling, which isn't necessarily compatible with that.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm sort of struggling. And when you spoke about what the hands meant to me, I look at Shakyamuni Buddha with one hand out, and I get a feeling of, oh, he's there wanting to help. And, with the hands close to the heart, not having that feeling as much. Mm-hmm. So I'm sort of struggling with resonating with some, and this has been an ongoing sort of conversation in my mind about this.
Uh-huh. Patricia, you have your hand up. Did you want to answer him or? Oh,
just building on that, I was also wondering about visualizing, like we're using very particular pronouns and such, and or gender, sex, and how important is it to maintain that in the visualization? Because I'm thinking that can also be a potential distraction or baggage one way or the other, good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I'm adding to his question.
Okay.
I read something recently that came to mind as we were talking about this and speaks to my mind. They were talking about how Westerners approach meditation, and this was from a Theravada text, but I think it fits with this problem that many of us have had. Partly, it's the thing of like when we dwell, like let's just say not with these images or this subject, but anything, and we make it so personal that we get in our own stuff so much that we just stay in this like psychological domain of me and my mind and my problems and my history and my this and my that, that sometimes it limits us. And I find that where I feel the growth, whether it's with the kind of things that you're speaking of, which I've had some problems with sometimes and still do sometimes, and what I really find helpful is to just watch the patterns of how my mind is working. Like sometimes it's really helpful for me to drop the content of it's these pronouns, it's these images, it's this culture, and just look at the mind that resists. Like, take out the content and watch what I habitually do. Why is it that I keep coming to some kind of resistance? Or why do I keep coming to some kind of doubt? And so I find that to be quite helpful, just to watch the larger category of what's happening inside and let go of some of the details of the content. And that helps me to move through some of this.
It reminds me of a story. One time I went to a teaching by a woman named Kandrola, and this was in Seattle, and the title of the talk was something like, what was it, Women in Tibetan Buddhism, or the place of women in Tibetan Buddhism, something about women in Buddhism. And Kandrola took her seat and in the first 2 minutes said, this is not important. What's important is that all of us have the same capacity to achieve enlightenment. Now let's talk about the Dharma. We went right on to a very beautiful Dharma talk. That helped me to cut some things in my mind about making more story than there needed to be. But also, you know, we are living in a day and age where we're talking a lot about gender equality and those sorts of things. There are female deities. So if, you might come back to a Tara retreat if you're more comfortable with starting with a female deity. I think it's fair to say that at the level of enlightenment, there is no gender. It's just that these deities will manifest in forms. It's an archetype. It's an appearance. It's not male or female necessarily. Okay, so Vajrasattva is showing up in a male form. But think about Chenrezig, who shows up both in a male form and a female form, depending on the culture where they manifested, and depending on what's going to be more helpful. So I think the responsibility comes back to us. I appreciate what you said, Venerable Tarpa, and also to take responsibility to see what does my mind need now? And if visualizing deities feels like advanced practice that's too difficult right now, that's okay. You can set it aside. It's really, there's no insistence that we take this up. At the same time, it might be interesting to really notice what the thoughts are and challenge them, and notice where the resistance is, and see if there can be a meeting. We can actually have a conversation with these deities that we're in relationship with. And we do have relationships with men and women. We also, in our culture, probably have had a very strong dose of enculturation of thinking of God as being a man. And maybe we bring some of that with us too. So I know for myself, when I first started reciting mantras, I remember very specifically one day I was reciting some mantras and I heard in the back of my mind, this is blasphemy, this is blasphemy. My Catholic upbringing was coming to the fore. And it took me a while to actually work through that. So we do have a lot of cultural conditioning, spiritual conditioning even, that we'll need to address. But really, it's not about male or female. One thing that comes to my mind, Stephen, is I would encourage you to do a longer retreat and see how you go. Like, we're doing a 3-month Vajrasattva retreat next year. No, that doesn't help you. Okay. You could really develop a good relationship with Vajrasattva in 3 months, I assure you.
I think I need to look at my resistance.
Okay. Well, start where you are.
I'll start there.
Different things work for different people.
I'm wondering if it would help if you see these images as symbols and not like actual persons, like concrete, literal beings. And this is another thing that I've always wondered in Tantra, or the deities. I've heard that they're their own entity, but they're also they represent different aspects of the enlightened mind. So it sounds like there's a lot of symbolism involved, and I think that taking it too literally, too concrete, making it too concrete of a person or an object, that's not the point. So, you see Vajrasattva, he's white. White represents something. He's not like literally white. It represents purity or, other aspects of his appearance. They're not, they stand for something else that's only experienced through the mind, basically. So maybe could you comment about how much to see these as symbols versus actual deities?
I think we can see them in different ways. Two different ways come to my mind. One is there are persons who are deities. There are persons who manifest in the aspect of a deity. So we can relate to the deity as a person. We can also relate to the deity as a manifestation of the qualities that we want to develop. So that's more the symbology that I think you're referring to. And again, I think we have to notice what's working for our mind at a particular time, because the relationship will constantly change depending on what we need, and also the kind of causes that we're creating, and the kind of experiences that we have. So find which way works for you. But it's not like these are just made up images. I mean, they're manifesting for a particular purpose. And they are important in the progression all the way to complete enlightenment. We will need to practice Tantra to achieve enlightenment at some point. May not be now, but down the track.
If I look in my mind, then actually most of the day, as you started off the talk, is I visualize, right? Constantly. My thoughts are always connected with pictures. So instead of having all these habituated pictures about, conflicts or what I'm projecting into the future or past, what is not existing anymore, it's so much more helpful to have actually the deity constantly with me. Or if you visualize yourself as a deity, then having totally a different picture of yourself and of others too, visualizing others as a deity, and such as projecting something that is actually beneficial for your mind and for your environment.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, it's true. We're much more comfortable with our neuroses than our perfection. I mean, we are visualizing all the time because we imagine that, like you're a real person. You exist inherently. I can see that. We project all the time things that aren't there. Maybe you've seen that, noticed that in your own practice, your own experience. So most of our thoughts, most of our visualizations are based in afflictions, really, or some kind of distortion. And so this is an opportunity to, like you say, bring it around to something that's very virtuous and actually inspires us to bring forward more of the qualities. So one of the things that Venerable Jampa was referring to is that when we have received an empowerment in a practice, Vajrasattva is an exception to that, but when we say we have received the empowerment to Thousand-Armed Chenrezig, then during that practice, we have permission to meditate on emptiness and imagine ourselves arising as the deity. That's something that comes with the empowerment. Without that empowerment, then we just continue to visualize the deity in the space in front. But it's quite confronting when you start visualizing yourself as a perfect deity, and how that bumps up against our habitual image of ourselves, limited, I'll speak from my own experience, the limited way I think of myself, as opposed to thinking of my potential or even encouraging myself to go further with developing those qualities. Yeah. Tanner had something, and then, oh, Kathy?
When I first entered this room, a lot of people walk into this room and they go, wow, this is beautiful. But when I walked in, I thought, wow, this is too much. Look at all this gold and color. And the colors were beautiful, but it was so oppressive to me. It's like,
You mean years ago when you first walked in?
When I first walked in here, yeah. And it's funny to watch the transformation, because no relationship ever, you might hit it off sort of quickly with some people, but this room and these symbols and the people in it, it's been the relationship. Now when I walk in this room, there's warmth. There's people I care about. There's people that have taught me so many things. And the images, even though I might still have some trouble with some of them, I'm much more willing to go, okay, what do we have to say to each other? So, I mean, such a difference. When I first my first Vajrasattva, I thought maybe you girls did not get enough oxygen up here. It's like, bring them down. They need to come down. What is going on up here? Are we going to break into dance? What are we doing in this room? So it's really been an interesting transformation. And so, Steve and I know that you're going to just fall in love with Vajrasattva.
Coming from a Catholic background, as you know, we have a lot of saints and canonized people out of, Joseph, Mary, and who knows how many others, and Ignatius, and, So one of the things that kind of repelled me at the beginning of Tibetan Buddhism was the imagery, because I correlated that with the Catholic Church, with the canonization. Could you have any advice as how to overcome or how to, shed some light to change my perspective?
I think Venerable would have some really good words for you.
Really?
Can any of you call them up?
Well, yeah, okay, sorry, let me come back to where I was. There's so many things that are translated with Christian terms, like prayer, for example, that I believe that this is my personal stance, but I think Venerable agrees with me, that a big part of a Western Buddhist practice is to re-examine what we learned and what we bring from our religious background and project onto what we learn about Buddhism. We have to untangle that, so that when I'm praying, doing intercessionary prayer to God, or, how is that different from when I'm making a prayer, please Vajrasattva, help me to overcome blah, 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 blah. How is that different? Where are they coming from in a different place? How do I understand that differently? So I think kind of step by step by step, when we get stuck, especially when we think, oh my God, my religion's back up again, or am I seeing this as a God, or that we have to do a lot of analysis ourselves and study. And then in some ways, nobody can tell us how to undo it, because that's inside ourselves. But we have to untangle what we've brought.
When you say to unentangle, when I'm praying to a Catholic image, to God or whatever, to do something for me, versus going to Vajrasattva, help me to clean my obscurations, and what is the difference? I'm kind of putting myself in somebody else's care, right?
Who's doing the work there?
Me.
You're generating the regret. Right. You're doing the remedial action. What's so interesting is this is a little bit of a tangent, but we create negativity with our own mind. So doesn't it also stand to reason that we can purify that negativity with our own mind? So Vajrasattva is more like a witness and a support, reminding us of the fact that we can purify and we can become completely purified. That's one way to think of it.
When I was a child, I read hundreds of stories of the lives of the saints. They kept me as a little child hopeful. The qualities that were in those stories were not unlike some of the qualities that I hear about of the great bodhisattvas and the great Buddhas. Whether it was Saint Elizabeth of Hungary, or Saint Anne, who was the mother of Mary, or Saint Zachary, or Saint Jude. I mean, when I read the stories, the fortitude, the generosity, the joyous effort, the concentration, Saint John of the Cross, one of the great, whoever they are, what helps me is I just put them into the bodhisattva category. And so when I think about Tara, and I think about Vajrasattva, and I think about Saint Elizabeth of Hungary, who remind me so much of Yeshe Tsogyal. It's just almost scary, the way that she gave everything. I mean, her realizations were remarkable and her understanding the nature of suffering. So the God piece, that's the biggest piece I've had to work on. You know, I got really angry at Buddha when I went to take my Bhikshuni ordination because I realized he couldn't save me. That was the last piece. But as far as the lives of the saints, I don't have any problem accepting the fact that there are some extraordinary beings who may not realize emptiness or whatever, that they have these qualities that are not unlike the qualities that I still aspire to develop, whether I was 10 years old reading these lives of saints or I'm looking at Waitara. There's something that I've been able to bring into the Dharma without a lot of baggage, and has kept my mind open to a lot of the iconography and to the tankas and the statues, because I see them embodied. Like I used to think the saints were embodied with something really special for within themselves. I never got the God piece. I got them doing that from their own internal work. So then I didn't have this difficulty of them being servants of God. They were remarkable beings from all their hard work that they did on their own minds and hearts.
The thing that Venerable has said about the language, which I particularly remember and find helpful, is that it does sound the way you're saying it. It sounds like we're petitioning outward to this being, but even though the language is written that way, it's actually not what we're doing. And you have to kind of know that we've created the image in our mind, and now we're relying on something that we created to do this work of the four opponent powers or whatever we're doing in a practice. So where that helps me a lot is when we talk about I think the words are the external and the internal refuge. Is that the right words?
Causal and
resultant refuge. Okay. So as baby beginners, and with our mind, our eyes and senses that always look out, it's kind of helpful to have these crutches, like these things outside of us that we can rely on till we build up our strength. So that's kind of what's happening. You know, the causal refuge and the resultant refuge, we're going to become those things. So I think what Venerable Simke did years ago when we were first struggling with these same things, was she wouldn't really think of the Buddha very much. You just thought of the qualities. And I remember how helpful that was. Like when I get tangled up with some of this stuff, I just throw out the parts that I'm having trouble with, knowing that if I make it a big deal, later this is going to be a roadblock. So I know how important it is not to set up my own roadblocks for the future. So the things that I struggle with, Venerable's helped me with this too. You know, just realize I don't understand these things right now, and leave it at that, and set them aside and stay with the things that you're comfortable with. But don't set up these roadblocks where you keep like hammering your head against this wall, and then, because what's going to happen is someday, I mean, this is easy for me to do, actually, in some ways, because I know I'm obscured. If I didn't know I had any obscurations and I thought I knew how everything worked, then I wouldn't be able to make this even work logically. But I know my mind is obscured, so I know that my mind will be less obscured with practice. And then at some point, these things are going to be helpful. And it might not even be this life. But that's the attitude I always try to take, is don't reject anything. This is what Venerable taught way early on. It's always been helpful to me. Just things that you don't understand and aren't working for you, don't build up these roadblocks. Just put them on the back burner. And then every once in a while you take them out, and you'll be surprised how much your mind has changed. So that's the words that she's said, and that have really helped me a lot.
Great. Venerable Cheney had something else to add.
I want to complete the thought about the visualization. So this is also what Venerable has taught us, the difference between the saints and how we were raised, is that we thought it was all coming from the outside. But here, we, from our own mind, as you said, and I think you said, we are bringing to mind those qualities. We're thinking of our admiration of them. We're thinking of how we value them. Then we project them out. We do our practice. And in the end, we always bring it back and dissolve them back into our heart. And that these, remembering again and again that this is a reflection of our potential. If I know Catholics, I remember Venerable Rabina saying, if you said that in a Catholic church, that's blasphemy. That's the difference. That's a big difference. That this is who we can become, however we hold it. And that we project it out, then we dissolve it back in. So it's not like we're petitioning anything outside of us.
I have a slightly different opinion. Well, there are Buddhas who can help us.
Yes, definitely.
So both things are true.
Both things are true. They can help us, but they cannot save us.
They can't do it for us, but they can sure teach and give a lot of hints.
Two questions. First, is it correct to visualize that Vajrasattva is encouraging? Like, you can do this. Don't worry. I'm here with you. Because sometimes I do that and I relax immediately. Like, calm down. I'm here. No problem. You're not alone. And I'm like, oh, okay. But I didn't know if that was correct. And second question is, I forgot. Sometimes when I'm visualizing and I'm doing the practice, I feel like my obscurations are so big that they can't be purified. And once I just imagined that Vajrasattva was so powerful that it doesn't matter. He's so powerful. He'll help you. Don't worry. They'll go away. And that helped also, but I didn't know if this thing that just came to my mind was right. But so those are the questions.
Yeah, we will probably each have as many psychological tools to use as we need. So experiment and see what works for you. One image that I find very helpful is to think about an enlightened mind. It is not obscured from anything. It pervades all of space. I don't know if that makes any sense, but our minds are limited right now because we have this oppressive obscuration. And so we can't know many things. In fact, the way we know things is quite distorted right now. But notice how even when we're new in the Dharma, we start getting little glimpses of, it can be different and I can understand things more clearly. And imagine taking that out to its infinite degree of having a mind that's completely unobscured. That mind is free. That mind will know all phenomena simultaneously. And that mind, naturally understanding its own potential actualize, is going to help others actualize that potential as well. There's no way they couldn't. Spontaneously, effortlessly, Buddhas are working for our benefit. That's true. But we can't just sit back and eat bonbons. We have to do something from our side too.
I like what you just said, because here we have teachers that teach us. And we feel safer, right? And Venerable will do things that I would be afraid of doing. And I'm sure she would take my hand and come on, come with me, we'll do it. So it's the same thing. It's okay to think like that. Yeah. And Vajrasattva is just representing the force that you have inside of you, but you don't touch it, you don't trust it, you're not open to it. But we all have that. And eventually, we will be a deity or whatever, a Buddha.
Okay, we have about 10 minutes left, and one other thing I'd like to do is just draw your attention to the explanation of the mantra on page 41. Have you read that? Sometimes mantras are the utterance of a Buddha's experience or meditative experience. A deep meditative experience. But this mantra is more like an aspirational prayer. And so we are obscured. We don't really know how to request or pray, if you will, or we don't know how to make progress. And so if we read through this mantra, just notice the kind of aspirations that we're making when we recite this mantra. Om means the qualities of the Buddha's holy body, speech, and mind, all that is auspicious and of great value. Vajrasattva, the being who has the wisdom of inseparable bliss and emptiness. Or we could say method and wisdom, bliss and emptiness. Samaya, a pledge that cannot be transgressed. Manupalaya, lead me along the path you took to awakening. What a beautiful request. Vajrasattva dinopatita, make me abide closer to Vajrasattva's Vajra holy mind. Dido Mebawa, please grant me the ability to have a firm and stable realization of the ultimate nature of phenomena. That's the ultimate antidote we need, isn't it? A realization of emptiness. Sutakayo Mebawa, please have the nature of being extremely pleased with me. Supakayo Mebawa, may I be in the nature of well-developed great bliss. Anurakta Mebawa, please have the nature of the love that leads me to your state. Sarvasiddhi Mempariyatsa, please grant me all powerful attainments. Okay, so it sounds like we're asking for them to give us something. Actually, one way to understand this is please show me how to grant these powerful attainments for myself by teaching me. Sara Karma Sutsame, please grant me all virtuous actions. Siddham Shriyam Kuru, please grant me your glorious qualities. Hung, the Vajra holy mind. Ha 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 ho. Weren't you wondering what that meant? These represent the 5 transcendental wisdoms. That's our 5 aggregates will be purified and transformed and into the 5 transcendental wisdoms. Bhagavan, one who has destroyed every obscuration, attained all realizations, and has passed beyond suffering. Sarvatathagata, all those who have gone into the realization of emptiness, knowing things just as they are. Vajra, inseparable, indestructible. Mahamemutsa, do not abandon me. As if they could, they can't. There's no way. Vajrabhava, the nature of inseparability. Mahasamaya Sattva, the great being who has the pledge, the Vajra holy mind. Ah, the Vajra holy speech. Hung, the transcendental wisdom of great bliss. Pe, clarifies the transcendental wisdom of inseparable bliss and emptiness, and destroys the dualistic mind that obstructs it. So there are different summaries of that meaning, but here's one. O great being, whose holy mind is in the indestructible nature of all the Buddhas, having destroyed every obscuration, attained all realizations, and passed beyond all suffering, the one gone to the realization of things just as they are, do not forsake me. Please make me closer to your Vajra holy mind and grant me the ability to realize the ultimate nature of phenomena. Please help me to realize great bliss. Lead me to your state and grant me all powerful attainments. Please bestow upon me all virtuous actions and glorious qualities. Lamas, teachers, often advise that we think about the meaning of the mantra as we're reciting it. So won't this feel different? I bet the energy and the vibration in the room will be slightly different if we keep this in mind when we're reciting tonight. Don't you? And again, we're doing this for the benefit of all beings. We're not just doing this for our own happiness. We're doing this so that we can truly turn around and benefit all beings who we've had every kind of relationship with. We've been very close to every being. Okay, so I imagine as we continue going through the practice that we'll learn more about the different visualizations as we do the practice. As Venerable Chuni led this morning, you can do just a very simple light coming through, purifying, if that's what works for you. If you want to be a little more adventurous and try the visualizations of body, speech, and mind, and then you can even put all of them together. I remember Chuden Rinpoche teaching on this once, and he advised if we have an illness or a particular problem in our body or our mind, we can imagine that light, that white light, going directly to that part of our body, or if it's a particular, mental ailment. So that's something that we can keep in mind.